Welcome once again to my little home in what is today a very wet and humid forest. This is the monsoon season here in Thailand approaching, and usually this would be the time of the Vassa, the time when monks retreat into a monastery. We are required to stay in one place for 3 months. So hello friends, and firstly, the end of the last video, the guided meditation on Friday, I'm sorry, got cut off. A phone problem issue, something went wrong. It was only a couple of minutes, just the blessing. Oh, well, the blessing, not just the blessing. So hopefully that problem's been fixed, and next time this won't happen. But we never know. This is the unpredictability of life, but the more complicated we make our lives, the more there is to go wrong. So actually, on that point, I think one comment was that I had the would, was it a question or a comment? Would the world be a better place if everyone had a simple life? Referring to the simplicity of my existence. Simplicity materialistically, anyway. Here in this Thai Forest Monastery existence, that is, and well, yes, certainly the world would be a better place if everyone could be satisfied with less or accepting of less, because that would mean there would be less greed. If life is simpler in terms of what can be complexities of relationships and families, oh, nicely, please, bang bang. Good girl. Excuse me. Made me jump a little bit there because I didn't know she was out there. She's taken in the wet to just laying on the veranda, which is much nicer for her. It's not really allowed though here, I don't think, that the dogs come up onto the verandas, but I don't think anyone's around to see. Maybe it's just a preference, it's up to you, but I noticed that usually they put a little gate to stop them coming up. Anyway, Bang Bang's up here and Bong Bong's underneath. Bong Bong's a very timid dog. I'm not sure why she's so timid. You know, temple dogs, it's said that are naughty monks, because temple dogs were in a previous life monks who were a bit naughty. So their rebirth has been into monastic life again, but as a temple dog. So these are lady dogs, but that doesn't mean they couldn't have been monks or nuns previously. They're good friends. They follow me around and seem to know my routine. I suppose that's because everybody here has had the same routine. Well, not only for decades here, but in terms of this monk's life for millennia now, 2,500 years. And if these dogs have been reborn time and time again, which they almost certainly have, then they could well have been monks many times before. Certainly that's something that really has kept me feeling very, very secure in this life as a monk. That absolute feeling that it is nothing new. The ease with which things come to me. I think primarily because nothing has changed. The robes we wear, the way we do things. If, and let's just say if for now, for the non-Buddhists watching, and I appreciate many people are non-Buddhists, and that's good, because it is important to understand that not only is this Buddhist practice applicable as a religion, and I am obviously a monk, and I'm in a very Buddhist by religion country, the most Buddhist country, I would say, probably. Outside of China, but then that's a very different kind of thing, which I don't know so much about how it goes on there. But a very Buddhist country, its religion is part of life here. But outside of Thailand and in the West, where I'm from, this is still something a little different. But it is just as applicable to each and every one of us in our everyday lives, with all of the practical guidance of how to live, both mentally and physically, healthily, and enjoy this life, but progress towards developing wholesome mind states. So reduction of anxiety, of stress, of fear, of all of these negative emotions. And the development, building, increasing of all of the positive mental emotions, of loving kindness, compassion, and just general contentment resulting in happiness and equanimity, this calmness that comes from this Buddhist practice. So it is applicable to all. And therefore, one can consider talk of rebirth, previous lives, because of course we do not know where we're going in a future life. There is no understanding or predicting that. It's something, unless, well, it isn't something that even the Buddha said. This is something, this is karma. One cannot predict the outcome of vipaka, which is the results of karmic action, karma being actions, vipaka, the results of actions. One cannot predict those results. It's too complex. Even in this lifetime, you may have done a couple of bad things and a lot of good things, or a lot of bad things and a couple of good things. And for some circumstances or another, out of our control, causes and conditions, just the two good things could have made such a wondrous effect, it outweighed the bad things a lot. Or just a couple of bad things could have had such a devastating effect, it could outweigh all of the good things. If there was intention behind those actions, because these actions, either good or bad, without intention, are karmic neutral. These actions, well, not 100% absolutely neutral, but are less effective in terms of effect on future, or effect on results, or vipaka, the results of our actions, karma. So as an analogy to understanding that, one can look at our circumstances and the causes of those circumstances and understand perhaps why we are enjoying something, appreciating something, accepting something, therefore having an affinity towards it, or it's particularly aversive. We have a disliking a particular aversion towards it. And if I consider my previous life within this life, which was a very good, comfortable existence, a nice, luxurious life, very nice, easy career path and job, that hard work, but I was self-employed, successful, I could have things that I wanted and avoid things that I didn't want. But at that time I would never have considered this simple life. See, I am coming back to where I started, of materialistically very little. What you can see is it, my bowl, my third robe, my Sangati, and that's about it, what I'm wearing. And I would never have considered that as being at all imaginable or acceptable. But when, I can't say faced with it, when exposed to it in a monastery environment for the first time, when I went to the English version of this, which was not too far from where I'd lived and grown up, although I'd never heard of it until I was about 40 years old. So all my life, just less than an hour's drive from where I lived and spent most of my life, was this beautiful Thai Forest Monastery, established by Ajahn Chah in 1976, who sent Ajahn Sumedho, an American monk who'd been here in Thailand for some 10 years by then, and he was sent to England to set up this beautiful monastery, which is very thriving and still there today, one of 4. And this was just up the road from me. When I discovered meditation and got into it, I then heard that it led to Buddhism. I then went to visit this Buddhist monastery, thinking, what's this going to be all about? Kung Fu or fat Buddhas? I don't know. Of course, it was none of these things. It was just some people like this, monks, walking around in exactly this outfit and seemingly quite content. They weren't all laughing or joking, in fact quite surly looking to some extent, but serene, with an air that invoked calmness in oneself. And it was alien, it was new, it was different to me. But it didn't build any feelings of aversion or disliking. For instance, like when I first went to school, and then when I first went to secondary school, and then when I first went to college, and then probably when I first had a proper job. All of those things I can just relate to now in my body. I can think of those moments and immediately there's this anxiety and aversion to the whole idea. I didn't like establishments of any kind, of structure, of hierarchy, of being told what to do, of order, of rules and institutions, and to some extent even the idea of community. But then why is it, when exposed to this very strict order of monks, with its 227 rules for bhikkhus, and very little they can do, they can't even eat more than once a day, and you can't just go and get a cup of coffee for yourself or go to the nothing. How was that acceptable to me? Well, I can only put it down to previous experience, and I will say previous good experience, because I will put down the other occasions, school, secondary school, college, first job, down to previous experience not so good, bringing back that immediate reaction in me, physical and mental aversion. Now, you don't have to accept previous lives to appreciate that previous experiences do affect new experiences, because you have that mental association with what happened before. And if you disliked it before you've even had a chance, you could dislike it again. This is why we try and put the past behind us and sever that tie of attachment to the past, both attachment to things we liked and aversion to things we didn't like, but it's really all attachment in terms of association, of holding on. So this is where that little phrase letting go comes from. We let go of the past because that is attachment to previous experience. And also from that, from things we've liked, experienced in our lives that we want more of, we try to let go too of that feeling, because it is that that creates grasping and greed into the future, wanting more and more, because it's never enough. It's never new enough, it's never big enough, it's never good enough. The next new upgraded model is always just around the corner, tempting us. Insatiable desire. Now the point of this existence for monks, and this is the beauty of it, you do not have to become a monk to experience this. I'll explain how, but the beauty of this very simple existence is we are showing you, like experimental people. I won't say rats because that's a rather cruel and horrible idea, but I think you get my gist there. We are showing you how it can be done and how it really isn't too bad to eat little, speak little, sleep little, but develop one's mind through meditation a lot. And in lay life, not to this scale, but seeing that example as I did as a lay person, I found that my meditation improved by just knowing the very idea, not actually having even experienced being a monk at the time, or even having stayed in a monastery, and just having either read, seen something about them, or popped along for maybe a less than an hour or something to see what this place was all about. I went away with a feeling that stuck with me, something I hadn't seen before. Like when the Buddha first saw the samana, a monk as it was then, not a Buddhist monk, but a monk of the time, walking along, serenely content. It attracted his ideas, and he saw his life as not that content. And it drew him away from his life of materialistic luxury into the life of a samana. Now, yes, in a simple, both materialistically and mentally, life, if everybody and the world was simpler, then it could well be the world would be a better place. But it is human nature to have this tendency towards complication. This is why things evolve. This is why one day you had a simple phone that made phone calls and you just pushed some buttons and it rang. Then you could send messages. And now what is it they can't do? I mean, I don't know how often people use them to make telephone calls for these days. Me, never. I don't use it for much else either, other than this. But the point being, it is within our nature to have this tendency towards complication, and that usually results in acquisition, both intellectually of knowledge and information and things, and of material goods. Also, relationships, friends. Now, of course, the more relationships and friends you get as a result of this desire to have, which is really associated with greed, the first of these three root defilements, the more people you involve in your life, the more there will be some aversion, not only to things and situations you don't like, but even people. The more you expose yourself to social situations, people will come along. We can't really love everybody, like everybody even, and it's likely we will dislike people. And there is born hatred, the second of these root defilements. Now the third of delusion is just simply not understanding this basic Buddhist idea. Am I purposely avoiding the word philosophy? I think so, because it sounds complicated, and Buddhism is not complicated. It's not really an idea though, because it's the truth. However, when I simply say it's the truth, it can sometimes just put people off a little bit. Oh well, so he says. But ask yourself, the simple Buddhist teachings are, there's suffering. Can you argue with that? Is that not the truth? Really? If there's anyone who has experienced no suffering whatsoever, even if that were true, there is suffering all around them. There is suffering. This is the first of the Four Noble Truths. It requires no belief, no intellectual understanding. It is a fact, it is evident, it is there. The truth requires no proof. Now, if I want to explain to you about previous lives, I cannot prove it. There's no documentary evidence. So that isn't the truth. If it's the truth to me, through my own experience of this understanding, then that's a different matter. But I cannot convey that truth to you. And similarly, you to me, with any of your beliefs. There is no proof if there's no documentary evidence, and even documentary evidence can be disproved. Can you disprove there is suffering? No. Can you prove there is suffering? There's no need. It is there. If someone says, well, prove it, I don't need to. You're already suffering by not accepting the fact that it is there. Yes? You already have delusion, confusion, thinking that there is any situation in this existence. It's even timeless, locationless. There is nothing beyond suffering other than one state. And it's not even a mind state, because it's not from this mind we understand, but that is freedom from suffering, being our ultimate goal in this practice of nirvana. So that's just the first truth. Now the second is there is a cause of suffering. Likewise, can you argue with that? If there is something, and let's call suffering for now an emotion. It isn't just emotion though, it is a state, it is an experience, and it's just there, whether you want it to be or whether you don't, whether you see it or you don't see it. It is there. Always has been, always will be. War, disaster, disease, birth, aging, sickness, death. It is there. So that is the truth of suffering. The cause, similarly, to have that result of suffering has to be similarly there. Unavoidable. There has to be a cause. Again, requires no proof, no belief, no intellectual understanding. Now, what is the cause does require some explanation, some understanding. But it can be explained and understood by your very own experience. If you live mindfully just watching and observing your experiences and your mental and physical reactions to those experiences from an unjudgmental, impartial point of view, you will see how suffering arises as a result of desire. Desire to have, which is greed; desire not to have, which is hatred. Those first two root defilements. Now, it gets more difficult to understand when we see or hear about the third noble truth. Having realized there is suffering and that there is a cause of suffering, what the Buddha experienced and taught us, and then we now try to find, is the end of suffering. Now, the end of suffering isn't pure annihilation. So nothing after death, for instance. So you could say, well, if everything's suffering, I just kill myself and there's nothing, that's the end of suffering. Well, no. Because you wouldn't know, would you? If that was the end of everything, it wouldn't be the end of suffering because you couldn't know the end of suffering. What the Buddha experienced was the end of suffering, nirodha, the end of suffering, whilst he was still alive. He didn't have to be good all his life and then die and go to heaven. In Buddhism there are heavenly realms, but there is still suffering. They're not permanent. Everything is impermanent, therefore ultimately unsatisfactory. So the end of suffering, to some extent, you have to see again in little glimpses through your own experience. Now, just to give you an example of that, if I can think of one, have you ever really wanted something and you really tried hard to get it and you nearly got it, and let's say you're queuing up in the sales to get the, I don't know whether they still do this. In the olden days they used to have so many of a new thing, say a new iPhone released, and everyone used to queue on the morning it came out, and then you'd be in the queue, blah 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 blah, and then maybe, I mean, I've never done this, I think I saw something on TV about it, you get to the end of the queue and the last one's gone, boom, that's it, end. Now there's all that desire, wanting, nearly getting. This is suffering. This is desire at its utmost. This is the point of that kind of marketing campaign, to really pull people in. Then there's no more, it's gone. Or, well, you thought something was going to happen and then it didn't happen. Or you were really looking forward to having this type of food at a place, you get there and it isn't there. They've run out. Now this at first seems like suffering. Those three examples, very much suffering. But if you think about it, it is also for a moment a huge relief. oh well, they'll release a load more of those things in a week's time. Or, oh well, next time I come to this restaurant, they'll have some in. And you get on and you have something else. Now at that moment, because you have no choice, you have let go of the desire. They're gone. There's no more of these iPhones. You can't have one. Oh well. Or you run for the bus. It's gone. You missed it. Oh well. You don't say, oh well, you're very annoyed and you are clinging to the idea of what if I had, I could have got that. And that's grasping into the future. But actually, for a moment, naturally, you do experience relief. And this is what we focus our minds on in meditation. Learning how to experience, not only experience that moment of relief, of letting go, but to expand it into everything, into your whole life. So you know, you have diminished delusion, that confusion, that third root defilement, with knowing through experience, not learning, not sitting for hours studying formula, not even having to sit for hours and millions of years meditating, no. You could glimpse this in a second, once. It can never be unknown. Once you know the truth, can anyone take that away from you? No. The truth, once known, can never be unknown. Short of a mind problem, a brain problem rather, a physical brain problem, when you lose all memory or something like this. But ordinarily, we go about our lives, if something becomes evident and it's true, it's known. You cannot unknow it. This similarly with this experience. But it is so powerful, not only do you know it and cannot unknow it, it multiplies exponentially. It just snowballs throughout everything. So when this experience happens to you again, it just gets added onto this experience of knowing, until the next time, as you approach this experience of disappointment, you see where it's going. You recognize this feeling arising before it even happens. So before you're disappointed, you see, but there will be some relief in that disappointment. And you're almost kind of wishing that they don't have what you wanted. And you'll get that relief. And then when you do get what you wanted, it's all the more wonderful. But is it? It's just okay. So you've then not only got rid of attachment, not only have you let go of that insatiable desire by understanding and knowing it, how it works, you have let go of the attachment and the grasping into the future. So then, say you get what you wanted, you hold it more gently, figuratively speaking. You don't grip it, oh, this is mine, this is mine. So when you accidentally drop it on the floor and it's broken, or someone takes this thing away from you, it has far less of an effect of suffering on you. So this is why we have a simple life. Now, you don't need to go and get rid of all of your furniture and your ornaments, books and things like that. You just need to see them as just that. Furniture, ornaments, books and things like that. Just that. When you recognize you are no longer attached to those things as much, you can still look after them, you can still enjoy them, you can still appreciate them. Like you can appreciate the beauty of nature, a wonderful sunset. Some people go around and say, oh, I mean in some Buddhist circles, oh, you shouldn't you shouldn't sort of get, overwhelmed. No, you shouldn't get overwhelmed. You shouldn't get in awe about this beautiful view. Why not? That's not a problem. Becoming attached to it is the problem. Because then you want it again in the future. This is grasping. Yes, this is like taking photographs all the time so you can keep it and take it with you. No. Enjoy it there in this moment now, knowing it'll be gone. And if it comes along again in the future, it comes along again in the future. Don't be grasping to see it again or a better version next time. Meditation, this practice does that. Makes you see. Now back to my experience in this first monastery, I saw this simple, like this, life. I had already started to simplify just through meditation without Buddhism, because it kind of comes into that practice a little. You are disenchanted with things. Often it's a result of you sit to meditate and you see out of the corner of your eye something that needs moving, and then sometimes your mind can just start going, well, why do I even have that thing? What is it for? And do I need it? And that's another thing that gets given away one by one until you're sitting in an empty flat on the floor. Then you think, oh, I must be a Buddhist, so I'll go to a monastery and find out what it's all about. And look, you see all this, empty places. And it's kind of satisfying, not disturbing at all. When I first stayed in a monastery, it was very alien to me. I couldn't wait to leave. You usually can only stay for 3 days your first time in this tradition. So it was my 3 days, and I was racing out of that place on the Monday morning. I think I went on the Friday night and left on the Monday morning. But the minute I left the gates to get a taxi down the road to get to the railway station, I saw all of the future ahead of me of the week to come that I'd left when I went into the gates. I'd already been meditating, so maybe that helped. But just naturally I left it behind when I walked through the gates. I think whether I'd meditated previously or not, this would have happened. Just the sheer atmosphere and simplicity of the life inside that monastery. And what then? I was itching to get back. I couldn't wait to get back. In fact, on the Thursday night, I couldn't even wait till Friday. I went to their evening chanting and puja and meditation and Dharma talks. They used to have weekly Dharma talks then. This is all long time before COVIDs and stuff like that. And I thought, well, I won't be able to stay because this is when I was still working. I'll come again at the weekend. And I was working Saturdays. So I went on Sunday afternoon, where in the afternoon the lay people can have tea and talk to a monk and ask questions. And I went to many of these Sunday afternoons and stayed again, but mainly just visited because I was not far away. And it was one monk in that monastery who didn't say much at all to me, but it completely changed my life and made me want to become a monk. Because I said, I can't become a monk because, no, I said I didn't have enough really time to meditate so much. And he said, why? I said, because I have to work so much, Why do you have to work so much? Well, to pay for this and pay for that. Do you need this and that? Not really. So then why do you have to pay for them? And the conversation went on, and I think I've spoken of it before. But he just, just a few sentences, identified that I was just wasting my time working really hard all week, just to be free for a little while to meditate. Well, if I just meditated all the time, I wouldn't need to work hard, because I wouldn't need the money to pay for what I was doing when I wasn't meditating. I went away, thought about it, and that was it. I decided then that I wanted to try and become a monk. But it only took many years for that to happen, and there's not time for me to speak of that now. I'm coming to that, though, in the next few talks, because I keep getting asked the same question as to how you came to be, not so much why I'm a monk and how I became a monk, but how it is that I'm here now, in this situation, from what? Well, it is that question, again. But I think I can expand upon what I've said so far. In my generalised how to become a monk talk some months back, to the specifics of my own example, not to talk about myself, but to show you how applicable it is to everybody, each and every one of us. Not necessarily to become monks or nuns, but to alter your lives, adjust your lives just slightly, to recognise that tiny element that you're not quite recognising, which is the difference between contentment and discontentment in our lives. And that is the fourth noble truth of the noble truths. This path leading to the end of suffering. Because this is what the practice that the Buddha taught. This practice of right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right meditation. Just basically sila, moral virtue, samadhi, meditation, and panya, wisdom, the development of wholesome mind states and the reduction of unwholesome mind states. This is all the Buddha taught in 84,000 different suttas. He was just talking about suffering and the end of suffering. Just that. And if you want to make it really complicated, he was talking about suffering, the cause of suffering, the end of suffering, and the path leading to the end of suffering. What is there not to understand about that? Even what is there religious about that? There is nothing religious about that teaching. It's like me saying trees are sort of green and brown. The sky is either blue or black. The sun is bright yellow. These are just facts that we are able to understand, accept as truths. As are the Four Noble Truths of suffering, cause, end, and this way out of suffering. It's not immediate, it's a practice, something we like learning to play the piano or a guitar, or learning to ride a bicycle or swim. It's more like those latter two, learning to ride a bicycle or swim, because they are something you cannot really describe or teach so well. It's experiential. You just have to do it, jump in at the deep end. Or think your father's holding the bicycle when he's not, and all of a sudden you're riding, or all of a sudden you're swimming. This is meditation. And in that meditation you'll see that moment where there is no suffering, just that moment of letting go. No attachment, no grasping, craving for the future. That is the practice. And a simple life, whether it's materialistically or in your mind state, it is the mind state, the simplicity of mind state that is the important thing. And by the development of wholesome mind states and the eradication of the unwholesome mind states, so just the simple process of keeping the 5 precepts is enough to kick this whole thing off, start the ball rolling. And it's a snowball, so it will only get just bigger and bigger and bigger, and it will overtake your life. Just no killing, stealing, sexual misconduct or lying. And no need, don't take any intoxicants. Just those 5 precepts, that's all, is how you get the ball rolling. That's sila. A bit of meditation, just a few minutes, 10, 15, 20 minutes in the morning. Get up a little earlier. And in the evening, go to sleep a little later. And that's meditation. Wisdom will come about as a result of that, panya. That in itself, moral virtue, sila, and meditation, samadhi, that in itself will develop the wholesome mind states and reduce these unwholesome mind states. And this is how we arrive at the end of suffering. And once you've experienced it, you cannot unknow it. And then one day, if you put these robes on, you'll think, how on earth is it that such a seemingly impractical piece of bedsheet, cloth, worn in a particularly difficult manner, how is it that that just feels okay? How is it it feels like I've always been wearing this outfit? Well, I certainly have not. I mean, if I'd seen someone looking like this 20 years ago, I would have probably laughed. Disrespectfully, I know, but I wouldn't have known what the person was doing or what on earth they were dressed up as. And now, it's my skin. And I haven't had to get used to it. The day I put these robes on, it was like I'd worn them before. It also explained a few little physical discomforts I had about other kinds of clothing, and also this clothing, that are inexplicable to myself without me knowing that I must have experienced wearing these in a previous life. And that's just one example that proves to me, is proof to me, and I don't ask it for it to prove to anybody else, that I was a monk previously in a different life. Now, fortunately, I was not a naughty monk, not that time around, to be born into this life now. Otherwise, if I was a naughty monk, I'd be like Bang Bang and Bong Bong out there. And they're being good now, my dear friends, and she heard me speaking about her, and I do appreciate their company, but they're having a wonderful opportunity as dogs. They're very well looked after, and really they do nothing. They just, really like me, they just meditate all day or sleep. I hope they're meditating a little, and the next time around they might have the opportunity to be monks again. And maybe you will too. Or maybe you, and you very well can, become enlightened in this lifetime. So I wish you, with many blessings and with metta, that is loving kindness. I mean that in a, not a lovey-dovey peace and love kind of way. I mean it in a friendly kindness way, because everybody is your friend when you appreciate that everybody is also suffering, but you know that there's an end to that suffering, and you know you can help them by sharing that knowledge, sharing those simple truths. Not in a preaching way, just, have you seen this? There we go, that's it. Nothing more to say. Well, there is suffering, but there is an end to it. And it's in this lifetime to be experienced in the here and now, regularly, and ultimately all of the time. and that is contentment, which is happiness. So, I hope you can continue happily on this path, this Noble Eightfold Path. Not a journey, not going anywhere. It's not seeking, not looking for anything. It's simply progressing towards nirvana, ultimate freedom from suffering within this lifetime, contentment and happiness. Thank you for watching.